Welcome back. The Senate approving a House-passed bill which requires the Justice Department to release all files related to convicted sex offender and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. The bill now heads to the president's desk after being unanimously approved in the Senate. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer issuing subpoenas to J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank for all of Jeffrey Epstein's financial records. The chairman also requesting additional documents from U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General Gordon Rea. Joining me now is the man himself, Kentucky Congressman, Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Mr. Chairman, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So what are you looking for? And tell me what you expect, how this plays out.
Well, we really don't know. We're going to follow the money. That's what we've been instructed to do. This is a very serious, credible investigation. We want to know the truth. We want to give the American people answers. If there's a list of people who were participating in sex trafficking, we want to know who they are, and we want to hold them accountable. We want to find justice for the victims, as well as to try to find out why the government failed so many people. So I think with the bank records, we'll be able to find accounts, we'll be able to trace the money and determine if there were people that were paying Jeffrey Epstein for services, or if Jeffrey Epstein was paying and purchasing women in other countries or wherever. I mean, these are some of the worst crimes I've ever seen inflicted on young women, and it just doesn't seem like the federal government over the past 2 decades did anything to help these victims.
You know, I don't think it's lost on anybody that here you have banks potentially involved in, you know, enabling this sex offender, and yet who did they debank in 2020?
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah.
My goodness.
By all accounts, the banks were notifying the government. The banks suspected that this type of activity was taking place with Epstein, by all accounts. So, you know, we're gonna try to determine what the banks knew. But the banks did what they're supposed to do. If they filed those suspicious activity reports, then it's up to the federal government to follow through. So there are many steps along the way where I believe these women, these victims or survivors, whatever you want to say, they were let down by the federal government. The federal government didn't do its job in protecting people, in identifying criminal activity and doing something about it.
Do you have a read on how many suspicious transactions took place at these banks?
Yeah, there were hundreds and hundreds of them.
Hundreds and hundreds.
But again, Epstein was a big operator. I mean, you look at his estate; it's worth nearly $1 billion. So he had a lot of financial activity. We don't know a lot. All we know is he's a financier. When we get these bank records, we'll do like we did in the Biden investigation. We'll be able to follow the money. We'll be able to identify different LLCs and different corporations to see where his money was coming from and where it was going.
Are we going to see the client list?
You know, I don't think there's an actual Epstein list, but if we're able to follow the money, maybe we can construct a list.
I see. Meanwhile, Attorney General Pam Bondi's office is reviewing all of the pardons signed by former President Joe Biden's auto pen. And this following your committee's report, which argued that any executive actions that were signed by that auto pen without the written proof of Biden's approval should be considered null and void. What are we talking about? What should be considered null and void?
Well, look, we subpoenaed all of Joe Biden's records, his calendar. There were never any meetings blocked off for him to discuss these pardons with anyone. His emails, there was never any email correspondence between the Department of Justice or between Biden's staff or between Jeff Zients, who was the only one we could ever find, his former chief of staff, who authorized the use and heard directly from Joe Biden, according to Jeff Zients. So there's no record that indicates Joe Biden participated in any way, shape, or form in the decision-making of the thousands of pardons that were issued using his auto pen. So it's not necessarily just the use of the auto pen on legal documents, which you're not supposed to do. It's the fact that Joe Biden was, his cognitive decline was being covered up by his inner circle. I don't think anyone in America doubts that now. But also, there's no records that indicate that he had participated in any decision-making. And that's the problem. Only the President of the United States has the authority to issue pardons, not some unnamed bureaucratic staffer, which is what the case was with the Biden administration.
Well, there were also sort of random pardons. Like, for example, why would you pardon Liz Cheney? I mean, what was that pardon about? Did they destroy evidence for the January 6th committee? Have you gotten into that?
Well, that's being investigated by Barry Laudermilk and one of the House administration subcommittees. But at the end of the day, I think whoever was running the White House, Jeff Zients, Jill Biden, whoever, Hunter Biden, I think they realized that the January 6th committee had a lot of liability. So the January 6th committee did everything they could to work with Joe Biden to hurt Donald Trump. I'm sure the deep state appreciated that, and they issued them pardons knowing that someday maybe a Republican investigator or any investigator that believes in the Constitution would dig up and see that the January 6th committee wasn't truthful. Especially with the level of participation that the federal government had.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they issued pardons. They issued pardons for the January 6th committee, the Biden family, most of the deep state actors that were in charge.
By autopen.
Yeah, by autopen,
yeah.
All within the last 3 months of the administration during the lame duck period on days when Joe Biden was in the White House. So he was in the White House. They just had him stuck in the corner looking out the window, I guess, all day.
But they made sure to do it on days that he was in the White House. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
All of this is part of an overall fabric that I think the DOJ is trying to put together of conspiracy, beginning with Russia collusion, going into the impeachments, going into the Hunter Biden laptop, the Mar-a-Lago raid. Is January 6th part of that? Were they using January 6th to blow up this whole idea that Trump was an insurrectionist as a way to shut down speech and shut down any questions about the 2020 election?
Right. And, January 6th was a terrible day, but what we've learned is Pelosi didn't do her job, and what we learned is the federal government had a lot bigger role that day than we realized. They denied having any agents on the ground, and now it turns out there were dozens and dozens of agents, and we've all seen the videos.
In plain clothes.
In plain clothes.
And in Trump
And why
gear.
lie about it? If there was nothing nefarious, why be dishonest about it? And I wonder if the January 6th committee members knew. Did Adam Schiff know? Did Jamie Raskin, who's the most dishonest member of Congress by far?
More so than Adam Schiff?
That would be a good race, but I'll give Raskin the edge in that. And at the end of the day, did they know? And they tried to go along with the cover-up, because having that many agents on the ground and then lying about it, that's a red flag in anybody's book.
Wow.
So there's a lot about January 6th that we still don't know. We may never know. But one thing we do know is the federal government wasn't honest about the number of plainclothes agents.
And in terms of the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, you sent subpoenas already to the banks. Do you want these chairmen and CEOs?
Well, right now we want
to testify.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. After we look at the suspicious activity reports, we're going to have specific questions about specific transactions and specific accounts. That's how, if there's no Epstein list, and we want to find out if there were people that were violating the law and who they were, we'll have to construct our own. If there's not an Epstein list floating around in the Department of Justice, maybe following the money, we can construct.
Well, it's interesting. The mainstream media was going wall to wall with Epstein while you all were reopening government. I was watching, the vote. You're all over there voting to reopen government, and it's wall to wall Epstein on CNN because some files were released. We'll see if they keep that up. Now that it's sort of broadening out into Democrats. But the Speaker, Mike Johnson, says that the House will vote this week to repeal a provision in the recent spending bill, which compensates GOP senators whose phone records were seized during the Arctic frost investigation. Another questionable situation. I spoke with the Speaker about it on this program last week. Here's what he said. Senate GOP adding a provision in the government funding package which allows senators to sue if their electronic records were obtained without their knowledge. Why are you against that addition?
Well, the optics of it are terrible. We all agree that Arctic frost was a horrific abuse of our judicial system, and it was an overreach, and we've got to bring accountability to those involved in it, and we have to make sure that stuff never happens again. But I think for sitting lawmakers to vote into themselves an ability to go cash in on something like that, to me, it was just a really bad look. And I think many of them regret it. I think some of them are coming out now saying that they will help us to repeal that provision. It should never have been dropped into our clean CR.
So he says he's going to fix it. It should not have been in the clean CR, Mr. Chairman.
I agree with Mike Johnson. Look, everything that the federal government did to those senators is terrible. I think what we need to do as a Congress is work with the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi to hold the people accountable for an abuse of power. But I do not believe that we need to get in the business of starting to compensate members of Congress for deep state abuses. As bad as they were, I don't think we need to. And like Mike Johnson said, it would have been different if this had been debated in the open and it was just kind of stuck in a continuing resolution, which isn't supposed to have stuff stuck into it.
Yeah.
So the whole process that it went about was bad. I like all those senators. They're some of our best members of Congress, but I'm going to agree with the Speaker on this. And I think most people in the House, Republican and Democrat, agree that shouldn't.
Especially since you wanted a clean CR.
Yeah, right.
Bottom line.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much. Congressman James Comer here on set with us in Washington. Stay with us. We'll be right back.